Coming to you from his studio in downtown San Francisco, this is the Backstage Bay Area podcast. And now, here's your host, Steve Roby.
Hey everyone, welcome to Backstage Bay Area. I'm Steve Roby. My guest today is one of the most distinctive and forward-thinking voices in modern jazz. Saxophonist, composer, producer, and educator Greg Osby has been a notable presence on the international music scene for more than 4 decades. A founding member of the influential M-Bass Collective, Osby has recorded 15 albums as a leader for Blue Note Records and has collaborated with an extraordinary range of artists, including Herbie Hancock, Dizzy Gillespie, Jack DeJohnette, Chick Corea, and many others. The New York Times has called him one of the most provocative musical thinkers of his generation. He's here to discuss his current project and upcoming appearances at SF Jazz. Greg Osby, welcome to Backstage Bay Area.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Greg. Greg, I'd like to start with your musical background. You were born and raised in St. Louis, a city with deep blues and jazz roots, and you were already working professionally before studying at Howard University and Berkeley. Looking back now, what was the first real spark for you? The moment when music stopped being something you enjoyed and became something you knew you had to pursue?
I believe the turning point was when I realized that in one weekend, I was getting paid more than my teachers at school. And I recognized that this was a viable pursuit. And not only that, but, the immediate response of the audiences. When you're playing for people live, you get the energy. Mm-hmm. They fuel the band. They give you the motivation, the cattle prod, the psychological cattle prod to push you into arenas that you probably wouldn't pursue on your own.
Right.
So it was that and more.
So how did growing up in St. Louis shape the way you hear rhythm, melody, and community?
Well, the environment that I grew up in, the neighborhood, there were bars and taverns and speakeasy places. All of these places had either a very loud jukebox, a Hammond B3 organ where they could have an instant band, or a full band. So it was a very musical situation where music and live music forged, the backdrop or the wallpaper, the sonic wallpaper for all of us growing up. So I had no aspirations to be a professional musician at that point. However, incidentally, my mother worked at a record distribution company in St. Louis where all the major labels would send her company new releases, promotional copies, and things. And so every day she would come home with an armload of vinyl.
All right.
And so we had mountains of music to listen to.
Wow.
And that, that kind of cultivated a non-biased appreciation for any music of any genre, as long as it was good.
Well, was there a certain record in that mountain of vinyl that you talked about that really inspired you?
Yes, I gravitated towards the instrumental saxophone players, the more soulful ones, Hank Crawford, Wilton Felder of the Crusaders, Junior Walker of Junior Walker and the All-Stars, Grover Washington Jr., things like that. And then, incidentally, I wound up playing saxophone later.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Let's talk about your current project. Your recent album, Minimalism, feels both a musical statement and a personal one. In the liner notes, you talk about removing material, editing more aggressively, and even letting go of certain factors that had long defined your writing. What led you to that point creatively?
Actually, it was an opinion and an observation made by my younger sister. I asked her what was her impression of my previous releases and my musical output overall. And she said, well, do you want me to tell you the truth? And I said, of course, I want, your honest, unfiltered opinion. And she said, well, your music sounds like mad clown music to me.
Wow.
And she didn't say that, insultingly. I mean, she did it, lovingly, but she said that it was just too much happening at once, that she felt bombarded by too much information that she could process. It sounded like a three-ring circus with people on the trapeze, the trained seals, the clowns shoving themselves in a car, the sword swallower, the bearded lady, there was nothing for her to hone in on. So I realized that if she said that, and she loves me, I can only imagine what people who are natural detractors would think.
Yeah.
And that made me realize and understand why some people they didn't really get it after so many years, or why so many writers and critics and journalists, they gave me a side eye, or, negative responses, less than stellar reviews, because it was just too much. So that's why I wanted to pare it down, even though it's still a lot.
So what did minimalism mean to you while you were actually remaking the record?
Well, minimalism didn't come into play until the recording was finished. And that's my process. I normally don't give titles. I normally don't name anything. They just have working titles, it's very, song A, song A1, 1B, X,
Sure.
And then at the end, it all comes together to tell the story. But as I was, recording and mixing and editing and things, I said, well, it's a bit too much here. Let me take this out. And then I would go in and re-record things and minimalize the content, just so I wanted to reach more people. That's the thing. I wanted to reach more people than, the typical standardized jazz intelligentsia,
Sure.
People who sitting there stroking their beard and, it's like, oh, this is amazing. Yeah, I want to reach, laypersons, the common people,
Right.
who most musicians of my ilk have been criticized, that, we're ignoring them, or, we're playing things that are above their acceptance level.
Right. I like that approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So we're going to play the title track from the album in a moment. But first, can you tell us the story behind this piece and what you had to change in your compositional thinking in order to write it?
Well, oftentimes musicians, especially ones who've studied at a conservatory or music school or degree program, they feel, this dire need, to include everything, including the kitchen sink. And again, like it's a bombardment. And literally, when you write these compositions, you're pelting people with so much information that they feel like they're in a sonic firing squad sometimes,
Wow.
And I had to listen to my own music as a fan, as a listener, as if I had to divorce myself from it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, when we're married to it, it sounds normal. It's so normalized that,
Sure.
And then there's also an arrogance attached to it. Many artists will say, well, they have to deal with me, man. They're not at my level. They have to deal with what I'm doing, as opposed to bridging the gap and establishing a crossroads for people to comfortably meet you halfway. And so that led me to taking out, certain components and particulars, still keeping the intent intact, but not, it was just too much. It was just too much. It also mirrored many of my previous releases, where people did get it and many still don't. So I really wanted to attract more listeners.
Okay. Well, let's listen intently now and play the track. This is Minimalism by Greg Osby, and you're listening to Backstage Bay Area. This is Backstage Bay Area. We just heard the title track from Minimalism by Greg Osby. It's from his 2023 album. Greg is my guest today. Greg, you've always been deeply invested in more than just performance, in education, mentorship, and the broader ecosystem around the music. We're in a moment where young musicians are facing a very different reality with streaming economics, social media pressure, shrinking venues, and a changing touring landscape. From where you sit right now, what concerns you most about the current state of art, and what gives you real optimism when you look at the next generation?
Well, first of all, I feel morally and socially and strategically obligated to pass the baton, so to speak, because so many people unwillingly gave me, outreach. When I was a young musician, they indulged my greenness, my innocence, and my curiosity, and they bestowed upon me gems of information that can't really be found in any encyclopedia or any internet search.
Sure.
And so I'm bound, to extend myself and to make myself accessible and available to young people who are in want of that information, and they can't really get it in schools to a large degree because many of their instructors haven't had that experience.
Sure.
I was fortunate enough to come along in New York at a time when many of the elders were still alive and actively seeking out young talent. And so the mentorship, that ideology is ingrained in me. So reflecting on the current scene, so to speak, the international scene, not even the national scene, we're in good hands because the internet and digital access has afforded young people, the information at their fingertips. And so they're developing faster, younger, and at a dizzying pace. And it's very enlightening and very inspiring, during my master classes and my travels and my lectures and workshops, when I meet, youngsters, even at a junior high school level, playing like elders did, in previous decades.
Yeah.
The only thing that they lack is apprenticeship. And that's going on the road with an elder or being under the wing of somebody who's seen, how the mechanism works and, who can help them to avoid certain pitfalls,
right,
and to guide them. I'm more than pleased with where we are. Young people are playing great. They have great aptitudes. They're composing really solid music. We're in a good space.
Good. Do you see any indication with the young musicians that you mentor and work with where jazz music or music in general is headed in their eyes?
Well, every era of music is marked by either a social delineation or a financial one, or and so, from the 1920s to the 1930s, the Depression, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the Korean War, the social climate in the 1960s, the 1970s, free love and hippies and things like that. So right now, I would like to say that we're in the post-hip-hop generation. That's not an official term, but that's what it feels like, when I hear the way young people play. They came up in an era where music was put together in snippets, in constructs. And some of them haven't even heard the original versions of the records that that have been sampled.
Right.
And so they also came up in this digital age where, everybody's walking around with a supercomputer in their pocket. When these computers used to take up whole floors of factories, and now they have something more powerful that in their pocket.
On their phone, yeah.
Yes. It's just mind-boggling.
Okay.
Intellect and the output, from these young people. It's very inspiring. I mean,
all right. That's good to
hear.
Many
people who've been my students are now my teachers.
All right. That's good to hear, man. Well, let's move to the second piece you chose for the show. The song is called Thank You for Your Time. This composition is dedicated to Andrew Hill, an artist whose spirit of exploration and individuality feels closely aligned with your own. What does this piece represent emotionally for you?
Well, Andrew called me the son that he never had. And, we were very, very close. And we would speak at length on the phone. And these were like marathon conversations that went on for 3 or 4 hours. And, He talked about everything, and he bestowed upon me his sage-like observations and overviews of the world at large as he saw it through his own personal lens, and his own opinions about what I'm doing and what I could do to make my point more succinct and accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the conclusion of all of our conversations, he would say, thank you for your time. It was almost, and it was so sweet. And I got so much from him, not specifically, but just through osmosis, through hanging with him. I was able to absorb a lot of his processes and his approaches, just from interpreting his music and attempting to interpret it the way that he interprets it. Because when he passes you written music, the way he played it had nothing to do with what was on that paper. It was totally different. So I had to, get into his brain, just like my other mentors, Jack DeJohnette and Jim Hall and Muhar Richard Abrams and Lester Bowie and all these people who had been very generous to me, with their acquired knowledge. I'm just a very fortunate individual.
Absolutely. With this track, what qualities in Andrew Hill's music or life were you honoring here?
Andrew had a moderate stutter when he spoke, and his playing mirrored that. So it was really, art as a reflection of who he really was. And so there are some pauses in the piece where I allowed my pianist Tal Cohen, to do a stutter step and to express himself. And then the band would start again, then it would stop and it would start again. So I really wanted it to be a portrait of my impression of Andrew's personality.
Yeah. Interesting. Let's play it now. This is Thank You for Your Time by Greg Osby, and you're listening to Backstage Bay Area. just heard Thank You for Your Time from Greg Osby's album Minimalism, which is available now. Greg, let's talk about your upcoming shows in San Francisco. You're bringing this music to the SF Jazz Center's Joe Henderson Lab this coming Sunday. When you prepare for a set for an intimate room like Joe Henderson Lab, how do you think about shaping the arc of the night?
That's a good question, because sometimes, we'll prepare things in advance, and then, we'll have to make adjustments on the fly based upon the responses or lack of responses from the patrons. I'll be bringing my longtime pianist, Tal Cohen, and I'll be playing with two gentlemen from the Bay Area that I've wanted to play with for a while. So, we'll get together and in advance, and I'll have to avail them of my approaches, my concepts, and my modes of interpretation.
Sure.
Which, we've done remotely, thanks to the internet once again already. I just want to take the audiences on a journey. There will be some historical references. There will be some presentations of things that are familiar, but they'll have been filtered, through my lens and reworked, and personalized.
Right.
I have an issue with trite treatments of familiar material or repetition in any sense. So there has to be a radical augmentation of the means for me to be satisfied and for me to be inspired as an artist. So I think people will enjoy our presentation. Absolutely.
Can you mention the other two musicians from the Bay Area that's going to join you on stage?
They will be Jamel Ramirez on drums and David Ewell on bass.
Well, it sounds like a great show, and I can't wait to see it. And a reminder to our listeners, Greg Osby will perform 2 shows at the Joe Henderson Lab at SF Jazz on Sunday, February 1st. Showtimes are 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Tickets are available now at sfjazz.org. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Backstage Bay Area will be right back.
Are you a jazz musician preparing for a run in San Francisco? The Backstage Bay Area podcast wants to help tell your story. We are currently filling our guest lineup with the artists keeping the jazz scene alive. If you have dates booked at a local club or concert hall, let's get you on the mic to discuss your latest work. Connect with us directly. Send an email to backstage.sfbay@gmail.com. Just let us know when you'll be playing in San Francisco. That's backstage.sfbay@gmail.com.
Backstage Bay Area is dedicated to keeping jazz alive in the 415 by spotlighting the artists, presenters, and venues that sustain this music. The most meaningful way to support local jazz is simple. Show up, buy a ticket, and experience the music live. Visit BackstageBayArea.com and explore our upcoming concerts section, featuring both a weekly guide and a weekend guide to jazz shows across the region, plus the latest concert news. Thank you for keeping jazz alive in the 415.
You've been listening to the Backstage Bay Area podcast. Visit us on the web at BackstageBayArea.com. And don't forget to keep jazz alive in the 415.